You're listening to ThunderQuack Podcast Network. This is the ThunderQuack Podcast, the official podcast of ThunderQuack Podcast Network, where anything can happen. So strap yourselves in and hold on to your butts. It's ThunderQuack time!
Hello and welcome to the ThunderQuack Podcast, Captain Marvel Spoilercast. I am one of your hosts, Michael Cohen, and joining me on this one, I've got Kurtis Findlay from the Epic Marvel Podcast.
Hi.
And joining us for the first time on a podcast, right? For the first time, I think. We've got Katie Findlay as well.
Hello.
Unaffiliated, I guess.
Yes, right. Yeah, this is your first podcast experience, right?
Sure. Yep, it is.
Nice. Took a little bit of work figuring out how to do our three-way call here.
Yeah, a bit of a technical hurdle, but we got it sorted out. And I'm glad that you're here to join us, Katie, because it would be very odd but incredibly nerdy for two guys to just talk about Captain Marvel. But
that's very true.
I'm always happy to have that other perspective on one of our spoiler casts. And we're gonna need it. This movie is a self-described feminist movie by Brie Larson, the star of the film, as well as the directors, Anna Boden and Ryan Fleck. So yeah, it would be a little bit weird. It would be a little bit weird for us to talk about some of these themes. Not that it would have stopped us. We definitely would have talked about this stuff.
Oh yeah.
But it's always a little bit better to have somebody who maybe actually has the real perspective to correct us when we inevitably say something stupid.
I will. Don't worry.
Excellent. Yeah, I Captain Marvel is the 21st MCU film.
Unreal.
It's crazy. And we are just about a month and a half away from Avengers Endgame coming out. So obviously this is it's almost kind of the prequel to Avengers Endgame. It's kind of the prequel to everything. It's the movie that goes the second furthest back in the MCU timeline. I suppose that if you count some flashbacks in other films that show you, creations of universes and whatnot.
Well, and also Guardians of the Galaxy 2 had flashbacks to the 80s.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's true. Actually,
both of those had flashbacks to the 80s.
You're right. But so let's say like that present, like that takes place, it's contemporary time frame. So you've got Captain America, which took place during World War II. And then you've got this one that takes place primarily in the 90s. So excluding flashbacks, this is one of our chronologically earliest stories told in the MCU, and I don't know. It's interesting how they decided to execute that. It's a little bit unclear what the necessity of that was, other than just we want to establish a relationship between Fury and Captain Marvel, but other than that, I mean, like, I don't know, I think that it was kind of cool. But before we get into any of the details, let's just kind of give overall impressions. Katie, we'll start with you. Well, how did you feel about this movie?
Well, I liked it, which Kurtis always tells me that's like a rave review for me.
She's usually very ambivalent toward most of these superhero movies.
Yeah, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I like them. They're just kind of rinse and repeat after a certain point.
Yeah.
So Captain Marvel. So I liked this movie because I really do believe it's a true feminist movie. That's not the only reason I liked it. I liked it because it's a good movie. but the most telling aspect of it was that you could easily place any of the Marvel male superheroes as the lead role in Captain Marvel, and you wouldn't have to change a single thing about the plot, about relationships, about personality. There was nothing that made this movie, story-wise, absolutely have to be about a woman, which is perfect. It's like, finally, we figured it out. Like, Wonder Woman, cool, whatever, she's great. She's Amazonian. She's like a super goddess warrior. Okay, yeah, I guess she's female, but you wouldn't make a Wonder Man movie.
Yeah, and I think that's the basis of this, is like, if we are truly trying to achieve equality, then we have that in this movie here, where we have a woman character, but the woman character is it's on the same playing field as any male character. I think that's really kind of cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Kevin Feige's actually talked a lot about sort of with the future of Marvel Studios and the MCU itself. And moving forward, the idea that Captain Marvel is actually essentially the lead character. So if you go back, obviously, to 2008, it all starts with Iron Man back then. And then obviously everybody else eventually joins the party. And we get the Avengers as we know it right now. And that storyline's coming to an end. I mean, I don't think it's spoilerish or even all that speculative to say that Endgame will be very much a period on the end of that sentence.
Yeah.
And moving forward, Captain Marvel will be, depending on how you look at her, I think either the Tony Stark or the Steve Rogers. Personally, I like the way that I see it moving forward is that Captain Marvel is very much the Iron Man of this next phase of the MCU, and Black Panther is very much the Captain America. And sort of, if you put the two of them side by side, they will have very similar story arcs, I think, and dynamics going on, in the sense that one flies around and shoots beams out of their hands and is pretty witty and has a good sense of humor to the cast of characters, and then the other one is very much the sort of stalwart, I'm gonna punch harder sort of hero. He's got the weight of the world on his shoulders, and so you look at those, and who did I just describe? Because I described both. I described all four of those characters. Right? So,
except there's no way that I would go see a Captain Marvel Black Panther movie. That I just can't even imagine that being enthralling at all.
Well, I don't think that we're gonna get civil war between those two characters. I think that is a very much Tony and Cap story and inspired by the comics and their characters and their personas. But I do think that the makeup of the new Avengers team is gonna have those two characters at the forefront as leadership.
Well, obviously, if they're going to be billion-dollar movies, Marvel's definitely going to milk that for all it's worth.
Exactly.
But I think we're getting ahead of ourselves here. We're talking about the future. Let's talk about this movie.
Yeah, Kurtis, what did you think? What was your impression?
I had a lot of fun in this movie. I thought it was great. It had a really good story, and coming from the perspective of the comic book history, they made a lot of changes, but that was fine. The changes that they made were appropriate to the movie. I thought that they did a really great job of telling it. As far as origin stories go, I thought this was great. Partly because this isn't an origin that's just told over and over again, like Spider-Man's origin. So it was fresh. It was new. It was neat to see the whole cosmic aspect. They really ramped that up. Even though we've seen cosmic in the Guardians of the Galaxy's movies, this one was different in some way. I love the Kree-Skrull conflict. I thought that was great too. And man, the special effects on like Fury and Coulson were just fantastic.
Yeah, they really nailed that part of it. especially with Fury. But I also saw
Yeah.
a picture of Samuel L. Jackson on his Instagram today, where he's shaved his face entirely. There's no facial hair or whatever, and honestly, like without special effects, Samuel L. Jackson looks pretty dang good for his age. So I think like because definitely when you look at it, you look at Fury versus Coulson. Fury definitely looks better de-aged than Coulson
for
does.
sure.
Coulson
Yeah.
looks a little bit like a mannequin at times.
Well, he kind of does normally anyway.
Yeah,
He's a pretty stiff
little,
actor.
He's a little stiff. But I think that's due in great part to the fact that Samuel L. Jackson looks fantastic for his age.
Yeah.
And so I think the majority of what they did was around sort of just smoothing out some of the lines around his eyes and then slimming down his face a little bit. But it's very noticeable how old he actually is in any of the scenes where he's asked to run for more than 2 steps.
Yeah.
Which I'm not dogging on him at all, because look, I mean, if you filmed me running, I'd probably look pretty ridiculous, and I am not nearly old enough for that to be as pathetic as it is. So Samuel L. Jackson is fine, but yeah, it is definitely noticeable. He has the same run that Harrison Ford has in The Force Awakens. Every time Han Solo has to run in that movie, he kind of looks like he's about to start a run, and then they cut away, and you're like, he got there. Don't worry about it. But yeah,
I guess it's Samuel L. Jackson's because he's got a lot of gray hair.
yeah.
And that's what ages him. And if he shaves that all off of his face and dyes his hair black or puts on a wig or whatever, then yeah he's going to look 20 years younger for sure.
Yeah. And that certainly was a wig. There's no way that wasn't a wig. But that's okay. Yeah, I guess I'll give my impressions. I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. It doesn't. I would say it doesn't break my top 5. But
No, I don't think it would break my top 5 either.
But I don't necessarily have the connection to Captain Marvel that I think a lot of other people are going to have, especially a lot of the women in the audience. So I understand that even though for me it's not going to connect on that level, that for a lot of other people it absolutely does. And if it's your number one in your personal rankings, I wouldn't be surprised for a lot of people, because it is really, I think of the origin stories, I think it might be one of the strongest. It does away with a lot of the obnoxious tropes of an origin story while maintaining them, with a couple of really cool tricks. The flashback sequence on the Skrull ship being the foremost. But I don't know. And the other part of it for me that brings it down just a tiny bit, that I think somebody without the history of Marvel Comics knowledge, they wouldn't have this baggage, is that like I already know who this character is. I already know like so much of her history, and I am by no means a Captain Marvel aficionado, but I definitely know enough to know where this story is going and what the mystery is. So that whole mystery box aspect of the story doesn't do anything for me. There's no suspense in that. And even the twist, and this is a spoiler cast, so if you're listening this far and you haven't seen the movie, you're about to have it completely ruined, because I'm going to talk about this. The twist of Jude Law's character, help me out here. What's his name? Jan Rog.
Jan Rog, yeah.
I wonder why I couldn't remember that. I don't even think that they say it in the movie.
I'm pretty sure they said it once.
They say it once,
in
yeah.
reference to not to his face, something like Jan Rog's going to catch up with us.
Yeah.
But I don't think they said it really.
Not really. Yeah. So that the flip on that character. They give us a red herring at the beginning of the movie with because her memories have been manipulated. So Carol thinks that it was a Skrull that attacked the ship when after they had crashed, but when her memories come back fully, she remembers that it was actually Yanrog that had done it. And there's a couple of hints early on that sort of point towards that as well, if you're shrewd. But knowing that the Kree are essentially all evil in the comics, right?
And they are in the MCU as well.
Yeah, and they have been so in Guardians of the Galaxy. Although in Guardians of the Galaxy, they're represented as like, oh well, there's peace between the Kree and everybody else right now. But obviously that was the end of a conflict, and Ronan continues his insane quest. And
Ronan is he's like a renegade in that movie.
Yeah, he's a radical.
And not really part of, but if you've been watching Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., like the Kree are all over that show and are very, very evil. And so it's not a big surprise.
Yeah, that's a very big if you've been watching Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., because I don't know that. Look,
well, and so just to jump back to something you said about you have the knowledge of the character already, and that kind of diminished the movie for you. Well, kind of. I am somebody who went into it with absolutely no knowledge of who Captain Marvel is, and the two other movies I would compare that to would be Doctor Strange, and I had absolutely no frame of reference for him. And Black Panther. And I was just going to comment on your point that, this movie probably ranks higher for people like for women because it's such a strong feminist movie. But I also really want to point out that it's a strong movie because Black Panther, it really hit home for the Black communities, which is great, and I think it was a really important movie in that way. But I would not say it was a good movie. Doctor Strange was like a good, funny movie, but I know people draw parallels between Black Panther and Captain Marvel, and I feel like it kind of cheapens Captain Marvel to say that, okay, well, the ladies will really like it. Just
because they're ladies.
Just because they're ladies. Yeah. Whereas I like it, and I think most people will like it because it's a good movie.
Yeah.
Whereas I didn't like Black Panther.
Yeah.
Because it's not a good movie.
Yeah. Okay, well, Black Panther, that's a different conversation. But because I like Black Panther quite a bit. I think it's really good. But
I know. I think it's really weird that you and I both like Captain Marvel, Mike.
Yeah, and like I do, like I definitely put this this movie is definitely high up in my ranking. And more so, I would say that there are three types of Marvel movies. There are the high tier, the medium tier, and the low tier ones. And so like the low tier ones are the ones that we don't go back and rewatch unless we have to. That's like The Incredible Hulk and Thor the Dark World. And there's really only a few movies that fall into that one.
For me, it's going to be Guardians of the Galaxy 2.
Yeah, most of the movies I think fall into that medium tier. But then like there are a few that I think kind of rise above sort of the average movie-going experience of an MCU film, and I would say that Captain Marvel is in that tier. It's in there with like Black Panther, Spider-Man: Homecoming for me, and the Avengers movies. Which all kind of raise the stakes in different ways, and really sort of elevate beyond and have something more to say than just, I love the Iron Man movies. Iron Man's my favorite character in the MCU, right? But I wouldn't say that Iron Man 1 and 2 have anything to say. Iron Man 3 is a different question, but that's kind of a separate conversation because I do think that there's a really great thematic through line in Iron Man 3. But 1 and 2, even though I really love them, they're not they didn't open my eyes to anything, or they're not sort of out there sort of speaking to a larger message. They're just really cool movies with a guy in a flying suit of armor that says funny things, right? Like that's all I need them to be. But that's why they're in that mid tier. And even Ant-Man and the Wasp, which is in my top 5, I would consider that a mid tier one, because again, it's Ant-Man and the Wasp is awesome. And there's a bit of the feminist type stuff, sort of undertone in that one as well, with both of the Wasp characters kind of coming to the forefront in that one. But at the same time, it's very much just a sort of an action movie with funny quips and that sort of thing, and cool special effects.
But does a Marvel movie need to have that sort of message in order for it to be a top tier movie?
As far as I'm concerned, like that's what differentiates, like when you say movie and film, right? Like a movie is like, oh, let's go to the movies and have a good time, let's have some fun. And then a film is like, we can do that, it can do that, but a film might also depress you and upset you or make you angry, but it has a purpose, right? And so when you sort of sit down to write something or to film something, and you have a larger purpose than let's tell a fun story or let's tell a good story, I think like that is the thing that's going to differentiate you. And I would say maybe the first Avengers movie doesn't do that as much. It's more about bringing the characters together. But even still, like the first Avengers film is revolutionary, right? Like it sort of it had never been done before on that scale. And then the other two, I think, just amp it up every time, right? And they just keep going crazier and crazier and bigger and bigger. But
well, I don't think that I would call any of these Marvel movies films in that sense. Then even Black Panther and Captain Marvel, they're still just
they're pretty
movies.
cookie cutter.
Yeah.
You think so? I don't agree with that about Black Panther. Like I think that Black Panther, and I think maybe the three of us aren't the best to have the perspective on this or the conversation, but I do think that Black Panther, it represents something much larger than the story that it's telling, and the story is very much another MCU origin story. It sort of hits all of those notes, but it fleshes out and paints a hypothetical world that doesn't exist, that really kind of holds up a mirror to our own world, and I think is important. And beyond that, it also is sort of this great thing for people to rally around, that don't get to see characters like that on screen portrayed in that way, right? So, and I would say Captain Marvel is doing a lot of that as well for a female hero. Like you said, Katie, like pull her out and put in Iron Man, or put in, like just create a male character, make it Marvel, and have it be a man for this story. And the plot itself doesn't change inherently. I don't think that'll be the case with the Black Widow movie. I think the Black Widow movie will be very much about, especially with the stuff that they've already established in that character's past. It's going to be kind of hard to get away from some of those plot points and tell a story.
Well, the whole point of her character is to seduce people into telling their secrets.
Yeah. And then her sort of the Age of Ultron storyline with her and the Hulk, and all of that stuff. It's just kind of an obvious mess that I wish they could just ignore. Like that wasn't part of her story. But I think that Captain Marvel has some great messages in it, and because it is definitely geared towards a specific audience. And when I say a specific audience, I don't just mean women. I mean, it's a feminist audience, so that includes men. But it is very much sort of in the same way that Black Panther is this sort of icon for a movement. Captain Marvel is also an icon for a movement, and I think that's important in the sense that it's taking a genre that is very much about popcorn and fluff, and doing something I think important and vital for society right now. So I think like they are definitely on the lower end of that film category. It's not like, you know, they're I don't even know what's an example of a film, but they're not quite
Casablanca.
Yeah, sure.
Fargo.
Sure, Casablanca. Yeah, yeah, like they are not in the Citizen Kane echelon, but they are definitely
Certainly
exceeding the requirements for a superhero blockbuster. And I think that's kind of the important part, is that this movie absolutely does that.
And I just want to go back to my point that this movie, I mean, maybe the intention was to gear it towards a certain audience, but that's not how it came across. Whereas Black Panther absolutely was geared toward a certain audience. But again, that's what makes Captain Marvel a good movie, is that they didn't put it out just to make feminists happy. I can talk.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, you were in conversations that we've had. You have mentioned already that there are lots of times when you were like, "Oh, they're really going to push this feminist thing in our face right here," and then they don't do it. What was the example you gave of that?
So at one point, the Skrull are scanning various people in the ship for threat level, and they scan Nick Fury. And they say human male, threat level low to non-existent or something like that. And I thought for sure that they were going to then turn to, I forget her name, Maria, and scan her and say human female, threat level medium to high, or something along those lines. Because it's like, okay, that's an easy kind of jab there. And then they didn't do it. Like, they just didn't go there. But that would have been a super easy thing for them to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Like, I got the same feeling when that joke started, right? It's like they scan Goose first, and it's like, oh, Flurkin,
right.
Threat level extreme.
Right.
And then Nick Fury, and it's like threat level non-existent. Yeah, the obvious third beat to that joke, the really like hacky, schlocky joke, would be to turn to a female character and be like, oh, threat level extreme,
right?
And then a guitar riff plays, and then she beats everybody up. That doesn't happen, but later in the third act, like towards the end of the third act, when Captain Marvel sort of awakens and goes Super Saiyan and has all of her power. And they drop the needle on No Doubt, and that plays over her beating the snot out of everybody. Like, that
was my favorite.
I think that is on the nose, because No Doubt is one of my favorite bands of all time, and that song is one of their best. Off of, I think, arguably like in like the top 5 albums of all time, because there are so many good songs on Tragic Kingdom, but.
And that song is an anthem for Gwen Stefani, and because she's really big, especially when she started out in her ska kind of grunge roots. She was one of the only girls in the business there, and so that was really an anthem for all of the girls who were into that type of music and things too. So it was neat to see that placed in that movie at that point.
It was. I think the coolest thing about the movie, and I think I said this to Crystal on the way out or on the drive home or whatever. I just thinking back on the movie, I was like, it was really cool to see 90s, like mid 90s girl power again, right? Because that was like a whole thing in the mid 90s with the Spice Girls obviously at the forefront of that and everything. But it was kind of a thing, and then it went away, and it was like, wait a second, like I thought we were working towards something there, and so having the No Doubt in there to sort of punctuate that scene, and I've heard from other people that they don't think that it worked, and to me, that needle drop works as well as the immigrant song in Thor Ragnarok, for me, where it's like like it just
It just
you're
sets
just
the mood.
punctuating what this character is all about with a song that's kind of like describing them.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's in the movie. I think that it was so successful in Thor that somebody said, hey, what if we did this? And now you do it in Thor and it's like, okay, it's kind of weird in Thor Ragnarok. It's like all of a sudden this song comes in. It's not source music. It's not playing in the world. It's just playing over the film. And it was
The
kind of
slow-mo
weird.
film.
Yeah, the slow-mo film. For the MCU, it was a completely new thing. As opposed to Guardians, where it's kind of sourcey. Most of the time it's source music. It's coming from the headphones or from the cassette deck or whatever, right? Like
yeah.
it's in the universe, or at least it's tied to that character in that way. And then with this, it's like, no, this is the same as Immigrant Song. Thor's never heard Immigrant Song before. Why is that song playing? And somebody, I'd heard in a review, somebody was like, I don't understand why all of these 90s songs play for Carol. She's not, like, she's from Earth, but she's from Earth in the 80s. She wouldn't know any of these songs. And it's like, because they're songs of a time and place. And part of that is sort of, I feel like it is kind of like the trumpet sounding of like, hey, this has been the boys club for a long time, with Black Widow and a couple of other characters kind of holding it down and saying like, hey, there are actually women here. But now Captain Marvel is kind of coming in and going like, no, now we're in charge, right? And it's things are going to kind of flip a little bit.
Well, and like you were alluding to, the song works because it works on so many different levels. Like when I heard it, my first reaction was like, I haven't heard this song in forever. and exactly like you said, it like brought me back to this era and these like awesome female kind of grungy, whatever they were. And after that, I was like, oh yeah, the lyrics of this song kind of make sense for this character. So I think it just works on so many levels that it's not about just putting a modern song in a Marvel movie. I mean, I guess, they could have done I'm a Barbie girl in a Barbie world. That would not have worked.
Yeah. Well, like they could have used the Spice Girls, right? Like
Totally.
that is of that same era. And they could have used something from
Well,
them, but
it's a little later.
It is. Well,
Spice Girls is a little too late for this movie because that was late 90s, and this movie is firmly mid 90s.
that's true. It is like, I think it's like 1995 or something like that. But yeah.
Yeah.
I guess that is a little bit later. But yeah, to me, like, it works so perfectly. It's such a great way to kick off that battle. And it's a great song.
Yeah.
It is. I think it is an iconic song. So for me, it worked on all those levels. Yeah. Let's go through and kind of talk about like what was your favorite moment in the movie? Like just overall, like what was the one part that kind of stands out to everybody?
My favorite moment was when Captain Marvel, and what did we decide his name was? Jude Law?
Jan.
Yeah.
Jan Ragnarok or something. So when they're facing off and Yanni realizes that he's totally outpowered, and then he tries to like slip into this, prove yourself to me and like show me that you can't let your emotions take over or whatever, which side point, that would be one of my complaints about the movie, was that we didn't know her well enough to know why he kept telling her not, like, that she was too emotional. That kind of seemed out of place. But I digress. My favorite part was when after she blasted him and she went over to him and she just said, I don't have to prove anything to you. And that's amazing. Like, I'm going to use that line in my real daily life, working at a video game studio, which is like 97% male, because it was just so perfect. It's not offering an excuse or a reason for the reason she is how she is. It's just it's taking that dominant male, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for?
Like dominant, yeah. Just the power that he tries to lord over her.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just completely saying that power that he thinks he has is not real. And that's cute. I don't have to prove anything to you. And it's not an argument. It's not a debate. She just takes all his power and just tosses it out the window.
Yeah, that was a great scene. That scene reminded me of Indiana Jones with the guy with the huge sword. He's coming in and Indy just shoots him.
The thing that I really loved. Yeah, the thing that I really loved about that scene was Jude Law's performance, because he kind of stands up and he's like he's getting ready to fight her, and like you said, he realizes that he's completely outclassed, and like because she's just like destroyed starships with her powers, right? Like he stands no chance whatsoever. And so even though he does try to muster up this bravado, he fails entirely. And that's all like that. I'm sure that it's in the script. Like it's probably sort of like there's probably a description on the line delivery that's something like Jan Rog says shakily, right? But Jude Law's choices in that moment of like sort of all of the words are right for that supervillain monologue, but the delivery is just a hair off where you can tell that he is terrified of her, and that the only way that he thinks that he can beat her is if she doesn't use the powers, right? Because he understands what it means to take that limiter off, and so he's just kind of giving this like yeah, if you're really strong, then you should fight me with punches or something. Please don't kill me. Right? Like that's sort of the subtext on what he's saying, where it's like, which coming from Jude Law, who is typically an actor who sort of exudes confidence and charm and bravado in a lot of the characters that he plays. It's kind of what he's known for. It's such a great way of subverting that and showing that like, oh, because as she's described outside of the films, she's the most powerful character in the MCU at the moment. So, like he's utterly terrified. I love that moment. It is so, and the way after she punches him and he just kind of flops against the rock, she walks over and she just picks him up almost like by the scruff of, like she drags him by his arm or whatever. But it's almost like a cat. Like when you scruff a cat and they kind of can't do anything about it. He's just so impotent in that moment, and she just stuffs him into the ship, all uncomfortable, and shoots him off into space. And it's just, they really nailed that. Where they solve the third act problem of a lot of superhero movies, which is we've been through so many fights at this point and so many action sequences. I really don't need the one-on-one face-off between the hero and the villain.
That was the problem with the end of Civil War. Because they did this exact same thing. It's like they had all of the big fights. They had even the three of them fighting at the very end, and then at the very end it's like, come on Tony, let's just duke this out, and did the same thing, and then they actually did the fight, and it's like, this is just so unnecessary. And
the reason I would say the reason that scene in Captain Marvel worked is because that was I could see there being criticism, and there probably is, about that scene being a man-hating scene, because that's when she finally kind of just doesn't put up with him anymore. We all know that she's more powerful than him, and like you were saying, Mike, she kind of picks him up by the scruff of the neck and throws him in a spaceship. But the reason it worked is because they built the relationship between those two characters. She didn't hate on any of the other males in the movie.
Right. This was a big betrayal. A huge betrayal.
Exactly. And it works because, I mean, again, that could have been Thor doing that, and nothing would have changed about that scene because they established that relationship and the betrayal. And they weren't using it as a cheap, quote unquote, feminist moment.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. It totally plays out in a very similar fashion to like a Thor Loki scene. It's you're right. Like if you could just see those two characters playing out a very similar scenario.
Yeah.
Kurtis, what was your favorite moment from the movie?
Well, I'd have to say that Goose stole whatever scene he was in. I love that cat. That cat was awesome.
Yeah.
But I think when I think about the movie, the scene that keeps coming back to me is when they are in Project Pegasus, which I love that Project Pegasus was in this movie. And they're in the scene. They're in those stacks of files, and they have to try and escape from whatever Skrulls are chasing them, or it's the FBI, right? That's chasing them. Or something like that.
It's S.H.I.E.L.D. and a couple
S.H.I.E.L.D.
of the S.H.I.E.L.D. agent. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Because
a couple of them are Skrull.
That's right.
Yeah.
But I just love how they work together. This is Fury and Captain Marvel's first real, their first real team up, where they're trusting each other to help each other out. And so I thought it was really great to see the camaraderie build through that. It was exciting. I love just the way that they played with the light and dark, with the lights turning on and off and that kind of thing. I thought it was a good scene.
Yeah. The tape scene where we get to see Nick Fury being Agent Nick Fury, doing his thing.
Yes, that was really cool.
And then she photon blasts the door, and he's like,
and then she
his line where he's like, you tell me you could have done that the whole time. You let me play with tape when you could have just gone pow, and we could have been. And it's like, yeah, it's so good. It's such a great Samuel L. Jackson moment.
I also want to. I know we're talking about favorite moments, but I have to interject. One of the things that I didn't love about the movie was that they turned Nick Fury into such a kind of bumbling idiot. Like he was the comic relief, and I liked it because it was so Samuel L. Jackson, and it was awesome, but it didn't feel like Nick Fury.
Yeah, and I think we could just, chalk that up to a younger, inexperienced Nick Fury who has been hardened over the last 30 years of seeing whatever he's seen or something like that. But yeah, it was different for sure. It was definitely a different take on Fury.
I think my read on Nick Fury as a character is that this is the first time that we've gotten to see the actual person, Nick Fury, the Sam Jackson incarnation. Everything else that we've ever seen, with the exception of, I would say, like a handful of moments, have all been a persona.
Him on the job. Yeah.
Yeah. So like he definitely, especially like in Avengers and effectively, like whenever he's in front of more than one of the characters, he has to put on these airs of like, I'm the guy who knows everything before it happens. Right. And he's kind of doing his whole you have to keep both eyes open thing, like that whole attitude. But then there are a handful of moments where he drops his guard. And one of them is in Iron Man 2 in the donut shop, where it's just him and Tony, and they're just talking, and there is a little bit more of like the sort of back and forth banter, which I thought was really similar. Like they sort of recaptured that scene with Carol and Fury in the bar in this movie, where it's like that kind of back and forth, where and then this is why I equate Captain Marvel to Iron Man more than any of the other characters that are around right now, is that there aren't a lot of characters who can kind of get under Fury's skin. For the most part, he keeps his composure around everybody else. But Tony kind of has he's just got these little things that he's able to say to just kind of annoy Nick Fury, and break through that persona. And Carol can do that as well. And I would almost say that like retroactively, if you went back and watched Iron Man, you kind of see that, oh, here's Nick Fury trying to recruit Iron Man because he sees a lot of the same qualities in that character, right? And that's the
He's only in one scene.
yeah, and that's kind of the great thing with the MCU is that they make a movie and it can, especially with this one because it is a prequel, they can retroactively change the way that you feel about other scenes. And the only other franchise I feel that really does a great job of that is Star Wars, where it's like you see different movies.
How did I know?
and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, my perspective on that scene in Empire Strikes Back is completely different, or my perspective on that scene in Attack of the Clones is totally different now that I know this, right? So yeah, the MCU does that, and I think they do that really well. But I do agree that there are a couple of moments, especially with Goose, where it's almost it's laid on a little bit too thick, just kind of a little bit too thick. But I think that we're supposed to believe that Goose is one of the main reasons why Fury starts to adopt that persona. Because as he says it in Winter Soldier, the last time I trusted somebody, I lost an eye, and it's like he's referring to a cat in that scene, which is that
That's so
definitely
true.
changes Winter Soldier a lot.
Right.
My favorite scene, and it's something that we haven't even started talking about yet in the spoiler cast. One of the biggest spoilers in the movie, one of the biggest twists, is the scene in the Rambo household when Talos shows up, and Ben Mendelsohn, so great in everything he's in. I want him to be in all the movies because he is so fantastic. There's all throughout the movie up until this point, there are these weird moments with Talos where you're like, he's a bad guy, but he's obviously a relatable bad guy. They're really working this whole sort of like relatable, almost heroic angle on Talos. So weird. Why are they doing this with the Skrulls? Like, are they setting him up to be a bad guy in a future movie? Like, why are they giving him so much attention? They're treating him so much differently than any other Marvel villain except for maybe Thanos, right? And then you get to this scene in the movie where they're all kind of trying to figure out what they're gonna do, and they're making their plan to save the day or whatever, and you know, get her memories back and whatnot. And Talos just kind of saunters up behind them, sipping a soda through a straw, and starts delivering this great monologue sort of thing, like, and you're like, man, this guy is fantastic. And in that moment, I literally said to myself, I was like, I think I have a new favorite MCU villain. And then seconds later, the turn starts to happen where he's like, look, I'm not a bad guy.
Yeah.
I'm like, you've got this all wrong. You're coming at this from the wrong angle. The Kree have been manipulating you. They're telling you their side of the story, but you're not getting the full thing. Like, we've been hunted down. It's genocide, all this stuff. And then it clicks where you go, oh, he hasn't been a bad guy this whole time. He is actually the hero of his story. And that's sort of the turning point in that character.
Yeah.
And they do it in such an artful way because they use comedy to soften you on the character before they make the flip. Because he's been a little bit quirky and a little bit cute, but it's in that moment that he's legitimately comedic. And then they flip it, and you're like, oh, he's a good guy. We're going to work with him now.
Well, and for all those reasons, you also believe that Carol could actually believe him. Mm-hmm. Because in that moment, us as an audience are like, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so it makes sense to us that Carol so easily turns around and starts questioning everything that she knows.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think he's still a bad guy.
You think
Because
yeah.
the Skrulls are evil. The Skrulls are absolutely an evil alien race. There's no way that they are good in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And this is just setting up the next 10 Marvel movies where we find out that there have been Skrulls living among us for years. And they're going to take over the planet.
What?
Yeah. I'm sure Ben Mendelsohn is going to be back several times, and he's going to be the ringleader of
You
everything.
think so? You think Ben Mendelsohn is the next Thanos? You think like because obviously Thanos is going to be dealt with in Endgame, one way or another, right?
Yeah.
And then they're going to have to start planting a new.
Setting up something else.
Yeah.
And they are planting it here. And here's here's my prediction for the future, okay? The Fox deal's going through, so we are going to start to see Fantastic Four and X-Men movies. So Fantastic Four, Skrulls play a huge role in Fantastic Four history, especially with the Super Skrull who gets all of the powers of all of the Fantastic Four. So that's like, we got to see that guy. If we've already introduced Skrulls in here, there's the perfect way to fold in the Fantastic Four into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And then with the X-Men movies, Rogue famously has the power of flight and super strength in the comics because she steals the powers from Miss Marvel, and because she or Carol Danvers, as she was called before she was Captain Marvel, and holds on to Carol, like makes contact with Carol for so long that those powers become permanent. And that aspect of Rogue was never explored in the X-Men movies.
No.
Because they never had access to. I mean, I guess they could have just written her in with superpowers like that, but they only focused on the temporary power stealing abilities. Yeah. So I really, really want to see these movies connected in this way, and I think that they're going to set up for this big secret invasion of the Skrulls in these next several Avengers or whatever movies. My other prediction, and this is probably not going to be true, but drop the Avengers name and let's bring out the Defenders, because the Defenders are Hulk, Doctor Strange, and Valkyrie from Thor Ragnarok, and Namor the Submariner, who, if we're going to have
No
fantastic...
way, not Namor the Submariner.
You better believe it. One of Marvel's oldest characters. And if they're going to be bringing in the Fantastic Four universe, then they can bring him in, and we'll just get a whole. This is our new Avengers right here. Is actually the Defenders?
Is he a merman?
Yes.
Really?
He's got wings on his feet, and he swims. He's the king of Atlantis.
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds.
He's Marvel's
lovely.
Aquaman.
Oh my.
Yeah. Although the character predates Aquaman, doesn't he?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah,
way before.
Yeah, Namor comes first, and Namor was retconned later in his life to be a mutant. So he's actually one of the first mutants.
Yep.
So he also holds that title. So my hope for the future is that we're actually the Skrull thing. I think is possible, and definitely this could be a bit of a false flag, like this sort of. The Skrulls, they're not actually bad guys. And it's like, well, actually, Captain Marvel has been helping them build their ranks, and that's going to come back to bite her. That's possible. They could be doing that. We don't know what she's been doing in the galaxy for the last 30 years.
Yeah.
I suppose we're going to find out in Endgame. Probably not all of it, but we're going to at least get a hint at what she's been up to. But my hope for the future is that we're going to be getting an Avengers versus X-Men story. That's what this is building to. But
maybe
if you're going to bring the X-Men in, I think that the best way to really sort of bring that home and do something bigger than we've ever seen before is to do Civil War, but do Civil War on a scale that we haven't seen, and almost to take Civil War and break it into multiple movies, because I don't think that you can I don't think that you can tell that whole story in one film, because you have to set up a lot of stuff, and then you have to execute a lot of stuff. It's a big story. So that's my hope, as sort of what the Phase 4-5 is building up to. Phase 4 establishing all of the Fox characters coming back into the fold, and then Phase 5 bringing, sort of like cranking up the heat and bringing that to a fever pitch to where those characters come to blows, and replacing several of the characters, like sort of flipping some of the characters, because I don't think that Cap and Iron Man will be around in their current forms at that point.
Right.
But you have to replace them with other characters so that we can do some other stuff. But which is a bit of a shame, because my favorite scene in all of Avengers vs. X-Men is when Cap and Cyclops have their conversation on the beach before any of this fighting starts. But we can still get something like that. And I could actually very much see Captain Marvel Cyclops conversation going a similar way. I don't know. I hope that this decision with the Skrulls doesn't get reversed, because I feel like it'll kind of take something away from this movie, because I do think that Carol's actions in the third act of the movie are heroic because of the context of what she's doing. And if it turns out that Talos was playing her the whole time, then it'll kind of steal that victory from that character retroactively.
But it will make the next victory even bigger, though, because she has been betrayed by both of those races.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I really like the angle that not all aliens are evil. And that, to me, like, that's coming, I guess, as a Star Wars fan and as a Star Trek fan, where it's like, look, I'm not saying that there can't be evil Skrulls at some point, but I don't want Talos and what they do in this movie to have repercussions. I want us to discover that there was another Skrull with them, or that maybe there are other Skrulls on Earth that were hidden, but that are part of a different faction, in the same way that Ronan is different from the rest of the Kree, right? Yeah, and that like there are the Skrulls that just want to coexist and didn't want any part of any war, and then there are the Skrulls who've been radicalized as a result of the war with the Kree, and they're going to do whatever they can in order to survive and fight back against the Kree. And if that means taking over Earth to use Earth as a weapon in that battle, then that's what that's going to be, right? So I can see that, and that's very much a Fantastic Four story. Just as long as the Fantastic Four aren't fighting Mole Men. I just don't know how that can get pulled. Never say never with the MCU. They've done some pretty crazy stuff.
Well, the thing about Mole Man is that he has giant monsters. We could get a whole Godzilla thing going on, and that would be awesome.
That is true.
Yeah,
that is true.
There we go. Okay. Well, sorry. One more point, and then we should probably wrap this up. Everyone's talking about how much this is a feminist movie, but what about the subtext about America going into the Middle East and taking out, like taking the war into their hands, and these poor refugee families with nowhere to go? That's the whole Kree-Skrull situation. I think the Kree is like an analogy for big ol' America, with the Skrulls in this one being the Middle East, whatever cities they happen to be in, with all of these refugees having to flee and start a new life and find a new place to be. People aren't talking about that side of things, I think.
It's because, but Kurtis, Captain Marvel is a woman.
Oh yeah, that's right.
I think the feminist thing is a little bit more literal in the movie. Definitely. And I think that theme, it takes a little bit of extrapolation. And I'm going to go out on a limb. I know our audience, and I know that the people listening to this podcast aren't going to have too much of a problem with what I'm about to say. But the people that you're talking about that are going to be angry about something like that, or like get up in arms and start that discussion, Because I think like you and I, like, you know, we're gonna watch this movie, see something like that, and go like, that's really interesting food for thought. You know, like it really does kind of hold a mirror up to our current geopolitical situation. It's like, you know, we're gonna have a real thoughtful discussion about it. The people who are gonna be like, this is dumb, it's over their heads. I don't think that.
I would suggest that those are the very people who are too busy complaining about Captain Marvel being a woman and putting crazy thoughts into our female population's heads that they're going to be distracted by that for a while. It's
I think so.
It's going to go on for a while.
Yeah, they have to see, like racist people, like capital R racist people who are like, oh, anybody with dark skin is a bad person. Those people have such a block in their mind about skin color. They can't see the Kree Skrull thing as an allegory. They literally see it like, how could a green-skinned person have anything to do with a brown-skinned person? They're different. Can't you tell? They have different colored skin, right? So they're never going to look at that and go like, oh, there's a metaphor here. Because they're too busy actually looking at the color of people's skin and then making judgments based on that.
Well,
so they look at it and they go, well, this is a unique situation.
No, I don't think that's true because
you know, like
they are. If I was reading it, we were reading an article yesterday about how they were pulling out all of the teeny tiny things about this movie that made it hateful against men. Like Nick Fury was shown washing dishes.
Gasp.
So therefore, they're trying to weaken the male, the you know what a male is supposed to be in the worldview or something like that. And like that, if they're going to that much detail, then for sure they're going to know the Kree Skrull allegory. Like there's no way.
But I agree with your point, Mike, that a lot of them will use the excuse of, oh, well, this is nothing like the real world situation that we're in because those are aliens and like it's like two alien races. It's not even in America.
Yeah.
So there is some truth to what you say.
Yeah.
In the comics, the Kree are blue-skinned and they're pink-skinned. And there is some big race issues between the two different races of Kree in the comics. And they didn't bring that up in this one at all. But if they ever dive into that, then there's another America allegory for you right there.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, like I think the biggest indicator that metaphor holds water is when the Kree are described as essentially being colonizers.
Yeah.
That go into an area and then essentially say like, oh, we're here now. We're going to bring our way of life and your way of life is irrelevant at this point. Like the Kree are here. We're superior. We're better than everybody else. We've got it figured out. You guys are going to have to get with the program or we're going to do something about it. And I think that is very much, it's certainly not how Americans see themselves. I don't think that speaks for all Americans, but I do think that there's a tone to America that's in its very DNA, and you know, as Canadians, we also can't get away from these aspects in our own history as well. But America certainly embraces it still to this day, the idea of manifest destiny and the concepts that spring out of that. And that is very much the same ideology as the Kree, which is that like, well, if we get there and we have bigger guns, then we're in charge. And the Skrulls being a metaphor for destabilized governments and regions and that sort of thing, like you say, like in the Middle East. I think that's a pretty apt metaphor. And I think that working with that and working with Captain Marvel, sort of seeing both sides of this conflict and realizing, well, these people need help. They're refugees. They're not evil. Everything they've done in defense of their family. All of that sort of thing. Like I think that's definitely a metaphor that I think is important, but it is very much subtextual. And I don't know that a ton of people catch it.
I'm American, and I didn't pick up on it.
It didn't offend you to your very core?
Maybe I'm not a good American. I don't know.
Yeah. I think they might revoke your status.
Whoops.
You're not nearly offended enough about any of this stuff.
I know.
For us to pick up on the fact that you're American right off the bat.
I know.
Well, like you said, I think this is a good place to sort of wrap up. We've talked about everything that I wanted to talk about. I'm trying to think if there was anything else in the movie. Blockbuster and Radio Shack getting shout-outs was really cool.
That was good.
The Game Boy and all of that. Like, there were a lot of really cool 90s references for those of us who grew up in that time period.
One of my favorite albums of all time is Smashing Pumpkins and the Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness. And there's a big poster right at the beginning there. So that was cool.
Nice.
I'm excited to see Monica come back in the sequel when we're in the present day, and she can join Captain America or Captain Marvel's Carol Corps, become a superhero herself.
Yeah.
Who's Monica?
That was Maria's daughter.
Oh.
Yeah, she becomes Captain Marvel at some point in comic history.
I thought we were talking about Friends there for a second.
Yeah, Monica and Ross. Oh yeah, because we're talking about the 90s.
Yeah, you lost me.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
Oh, and Stanley's. I just have more to talk about. Stanley's amazing tribute at the beginning. My boys, we took our boys to go see this movie, and they loved it. And they love spotting Stanley's cameos and in every single movie, and they think it's hilarious. So when I know it was supposed to be a nice tribute at the beginning of the movie, when all of when the Marvel logo is flickering by and it's all Stan Lee, Peter was busting a gut. He thought it was so funny that there was all of these Stan Lees there. And I was like, stop laughing. This is supposed to be serious.
It was an embarrassing parent moment.
Well, in my theater, we were in the IMAX showing. And it was like, there was like a cheer and then silence. You could hear a pin drop if you turn the music off. And then when it ended and like it dissolves into the Marvel Studios logo, it just like the theater erupted in applause. And
ours did too. Yeah,
it was pretty awesome. And it was one of those things where it's like, look, not everybody's a hardcore Marvel fan. That's fine. But if you are and you don't go on opening night to these movies, you miss out on so many great things like that. So many great moments. Yep. Because it was really, really cool. It was such a great tribute, and yeah, everybody was clapping, and there were no shortage of single man tears in that theater. I'm positive. I may have rolled one or two myself. It was definitely a great tribute to his legacy, and hopefully it's not the last time that we're gonna see him. Hopefully we're gonna see cameos in Endgame and Spider-Man: Far From Home.
Yeah, I think we are. Yeah,
but time will tell on that one. It would be really great if Spider-Man is the last time, just because of the connection to that character and all of that. But whether or not he has cameos in future movies or not, his presence will always be there. So. I saw some right-wing commentator posted something about like, can you even imagine how Stan Lee would feel if he were still alive to see Captain Marvel?
Oh my word!
And it was just that, like, it was obviously somebody who has no idea what they're talking about. And the thread of replies of people just being like, yeah. He's in these movies, you dummy. Like, how obtuse do you have to be? My God, the creator of these stories would be disgusted at this feminist propaganda. Wow. And it's like, one of his biggest creations is all about like equality and like not judging people for their differences and caring about what's it's just so absurd.
It was Stan Lee's idea in the first place to give Carol Danvers superpowers and model her after Captain Marvel in the 70s. They called her Miss Marvel.
Yeah.
But that was Stan's idea. Like, he was all for it. And he was alive in 2012 when Carol Danvers became Captain Marvel in the comics, and he didn't have any problem with it then.
Yeah. So, if you think Stan would have a problem with it, you shouldn't be watching Marvel movies. Or maybe you should be watching more Marvel movies, actually. I think that's probably the point. Cool. Well, that does it. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thanks for listening. If you want to support ThunderQuack, you can do that by heading to, you can go to store.thunderquack.com. You can buy awesome merchandise. You can also go to patreon.com/ThunderQuack and pledge support over there. $1 gets you access to the exclusive ThunderQuack podcast, as well as our exclusive Facebook group. And $5 a month gets you access to this Spoilercast as an MP3, so you don't have to like figure out like how do I get this YouTube video to play on my phone, but like turn my phone off and put it on in my pocket. You can just get the MP3, which is a lot easier.
Yay.
So so head to patreon.com/ThunderQuack.
Or give me $1 and I'll email it to you.
Don't do that. Don't give Kurtis any money. I don't support that. We only support approved ThunderQuack support channels. Thank you, Kurtis. Thank you, Katie, for joining me on this one, and hopefully, Katie, we've turned you on to podcasting, and you're going to come back for more Spoilercasts in the future. What we really need to do,
if I can be the like voice of feminists everywhere, then sure. And if I can slam Black Panther and other dumb things, then yes, I will come back on.
Okay. I think what we need to do is at some point in time, we need to get you, Crystal, and Amanda all on a podcast with no men.
Oh, man.
Holy cow. And let you guys not be interrupted or mansplained to by the likes of Kurtis and I.
Did I mansplain anything today?
You guys were on your best behavior.
We were.
Good.
But we are men and we overly explain things by nature. So that's,
Well, and we're also comic nerds. So
we're comic nerds,
that doesn't help anything.
There's a lot of mansplaining that happens by accident. But hopefully, you say we were on our best behavior, so yes. I'll take you at that. Thank you for coming on, and thank you, everybody, for listening. And what's the next Spoilercast? I guess the next Spoilercast is going to be Endgame, isn't it? There's nothing really crazy between now and then.
Probably.
Yeah, so...
I don't think so.
Yeah, so we'll see you guys back here for Avengers Endgame in a little bit over a month and a half.
Wow.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
Make mine Marvel. That's what Stan Lee says. Make mine Marvel.
Do I get a catchphrase?
You can have one if you want to.
Crack an egg on it.
That's DC. That doesn't count. This is a Marvel Spoilercast.
Whoops.